Hello, Opening Pathways viewers. It's Tom LeNoble, and always good to be with you. I have Katherine Tuominen with me today, and she is the founder of Catalyst Brand Strategy. Love the name, Catalyst. Katherine, welcome to Opening Pathways.
Thanks so much for having me, Tom. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
It's great to have you on the show today. So, I want to start at the very beginning, and I want to hear about what sparked your idea to start Catalyst Brand and tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I think many of us who have been in the corporate environment, we reach a point where we recognize things could probably be done a little bit different. In my case, I was very fortunate to begin my career in the entertainment industry. I worked for Fox Film Studios as well as Warner Brothers. And at some stage, I recognized that while I absolutely adored film, I didn't always agree with the industry practices as a whole. And for those who may remember, we had a movement called the Me Too movement during that period. And I was there both before the Me Too period and after Me Too. And it was very interesting to watch the shift that happened internally when it came to the workplace culture, but also to see firsthand what happens when people truly do unite and start sharing their stories bravely. And so that really led me to reflect on, well, if storytelling is what I've always enjoyed doing most, how can I start to tell the stories that I truly care about in a more meaningful way? And so I chose to leave the film and TV industry and start my own agency. And now it's been an absolute pleasure to connect with so many impact-driven founders.
So I'm curious, if you look at yourself today, how are you fundamentally different than the person who started?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I would say probably one of the biggest things is, when we're growing up, we don't always fully know who we are, what we stand for, what we want to do in the world. And so, during my 20s, it was very much that early exploration. And I would say the fundamental difference now is I truly know my values. I know where to draw that line in the sand. I know when I won't, when I will speak up and when I'm no longer comfortable sort of abiding by what may be commonly accepted. And so I think this really means I can lead with integrity and build something I'm truly proud of. Whereas, of course, when you're younger and you're not sure how everything works, it can be very tempting to sort of go with the crowd or question yourself and wonder, is this just me? Is everyone experiencing this? And really draw the lines between what's right and wrong. Whereas now I'm proud to say that I truly do know what that is for myself, and I honor it throughout all interactions.
Great, that's a perfect segue. I'd love to know what your personal values are and which one maybe has deepened since you've been doing this work.
Well, most of us are probably familiar with Brene Brown's work. And early on, I read through one of her books. I believe it was called something about bravery or living boldly, something like this. And in the book, she gets us to do a question where you basically go through a list of, I believe, 50 or so different values. And then she says, select three. And then when you turn the page, she says, now cut it down to just one. And this is such a great exercise for someone who might be on their journey of figuring out how to live their life by their values. But I went through it and it ended up I should probably redo it actually because it's been a while. But back then, I recognized my values were freedom, creativity, and authenticity. Those were my kind of top three. And today, I very much stand by that, both in terms of what we've built within Catalyst, but also in terms of the types of clients we love working with.
Love this. Tell me, I'm curious what belief about yourself have you outgrown in the last year?
Oh, I think every founder would relate to this especially, but probably the need to kind of work and work to almost prove yourself. It's that chip on the shoulder thing where it's like, I can do it. I can, be the exception to the rule. We can, almost like exerting yourself beyond what might be considered normal to achieve this vision in your mind. And I think that while it's absolutely important to have tenacity and to, challenge yourself to be a better person and go deeper. Likewise, our health really is wealth. And there comes a point where we have to learn to go inwards, listen to our body, and really trust that the seasons and what those signals are telling us. So I would say that's been my biggest thing, learning to step away from less of the day-to-day doing, trusting the team and allowing them to focus on their zone of genius while also honoring my well-being a bit more.
Yeah. Who believed in you before you believed in yourself?
Oh, that's such a great question. I would say from maybe, I mean, family's always great. So my
Yeah.
mom was one of them. She was always like, go, take the flight, apply to this, give it a shot. She really encouraged me to dream bigger. And she's like, if they can do it, why not you? And I think that's such an early, I guess, lesson for kids to absorb. And it definitely informed what I thought was possible from a young age, which is excellent.
Yeah. Where has life asked you to slow down recently, and what did you hear?
Well, that ties into what I was just saying around, well-being and the rest. I would say I'm at a point where I'm actually so happy with the speed at which that we're working. I mean, AI has been such a huge component of what's possible and what we can automate, and it allows us to work deeply and focus on what we enjoy most while outsourcing some of those, nuanced or fiddly bits, which is excellent. And then likewise, I've also, because I love traveling, hence the freedom value. And I've finally found a rhythm for travel that I function best in terms of the workload and juggling travel at the same time. And that's taken many years of, living out of a suitcase and being a digital nomad and finally settling to figure out, what that balance is for me. So that's definitely been one of the benefits of this year.
I love this. Travel, I just got back from some travel, as I shared with you, and I hadn't been out of the country since COVID, and I used to go a lot, and it was so refreshing to be somewhere new and well, not new, but somewhere newer than I'd been in a while, and have that experience of opening my mind and my eyes and my heart. Um,
Hmm.
Tell me this, Catherine. What question are you still trying to answer about yourself?
Hmm. That's very profound. That's a question. I love how deep you go on this podcast, and that's one of the reasons I'm so glad we got the chance to connect. I would say one of the things that I'm still curious to explore is really what a fulfilled life means for me. So, again, going back to that early 20s journey, I recognize that success as it's typically defined didn't necessarily resonate with me, or bring me that fulfillment that I thought it did, the accolades, the reputation, whatever it may be. And so I really learned to redefine success or as fulfillment, and then by extension, based on my values. So I'm still fine tuning what a truly fulfilled life would look like. I think, it's the age old thing of what would on your deathbed, what would you wish or what things would you regret? And so I really try and live life with that in mind, so I can, I guess, make the most of it.
Well, I'll share a little with you from my life's wisdom is that
Yes,
idea of
please.
fulfillment will evolve and change. It's never static, or it hasn't been for me. And
Mhm.
I love what you said about the deathbed. My it's not even a goal or a desire will be true. When I take my last breath, well, being a lifelong learner, I'm probably going to raise my finger and say, just a moment, I have a question. But I want to be for sure one of those people that isn't going, I wish I had done this, I wish I had done that. I have a Thoreau poem on my refrigerator for the past 50 years, and the line from it that I identify with is about sucking the marrow out of life. I plan to get every little thing I can. So tell us about a risky decision that you made that paid off and what gave you the courage to act on it.
Hmm. We, to some degree, make risky decisions frequently. And by risk, I don't mean anything that obviously can put anyone in danger, more in terms of um, risk in the sense that we might put our time and energy in and nothing comes of it. So, yeah, I think that happens pretty much regularly for founders in general. I mean, if you're not sort of risking something, then what's the point? But yeah, I'd love to think of a more specific example. Um, oh gosh, maybe we can come back to it.
Of course we can. Of course we can. Tell me this, how do you decide when to pivot or push through?
Mm. This took me a while to figure out, yes. So in terms of pivoting or pushing through, one of the things I recognized early on was that if it feels like literally in your body, it feels you're still inspired, you still have that sort of like light, you can still see the vision and you know that like the passion is there and there's very much this almost like light feeling about it. I think that's worth pushing through even the tough parts because you recognize that there is more to it and the end is going to be so worth it. But then if you're starting to notice that spark, that inspiration, or even I guess like the day-to-day motivations and it just no longer feels aligned or yeah, I think that's when it's a time to pivot. And I know that's such a broad statement, but I do think that to some degree we are very instinctual as people, and when we can kind of listen to that and trust it, it does lead to great things.
Yeah, in my life, I've learned that some of my bigger mistakes have led to some of my bigger successes. Have you ever had a
Mm.
mistake that led to success?
Oh, absolutely. I think, well, well, isn't it funny? It's like it depends on what you define as mistake, isn't it? Because if it led to success, then it ends up being part of the story. And it's actually something that I encourage, most of the founders we work with to think about, where they often try and like hide away or shy away from those mistake points or those dips in the road. But when we think of any great story, it's always the moments of hardships and then rising at the other end that make it feel so great, that get the audience invested. So I'm not sure if I would define anything as a hard mistake in that sense, but yeah, there's definitely been things where I learned the lesson and I was like, okay, we won't be doing that again. And likewise there were moments where I felt like I was making the worst mistake of my life at the time. Leaving Australia was probably one of the bigger decisions I've made, but I also knew that something bigger was calling, so yeah, that it's definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, I had a client recently and their startup failed and they were thinking they were a great failure. No one would ever hire them again. And my response to them was, congratulations, you just became much more marketable. And we went through that dialogue. I know you know what I mean, where these fit what we perceive as failures actually made us more rounded and more well versed than someone who's not experienced it because of the lessons we can learn through it and what it teaches us. So tell me this, how do you recognize when fear is information and not a stop sign?
Mm. Another thoughtful question. Yes, I would say the way that I've learned to recognize fear is again like listening to my body. So we have such a lot of us would be familiar with the fight, flight, freeze responses, and I'm sure your audience is familiar with this kind of like body of work. But the idea is that if you're noticing, your shoulders tense up and squeeze, or if you're noticing that you contract inwards and make yourself small, or you're starting to have symptoms like shaking or sweating, or your heart is beating really fast, all of these are signs that you're kind of in that, I guess, flight or fear stage. And so I think it's just taking a minute to recognize, how is my body responding to this? Is it valid to be feeling this? Most likely, yes, to some degree. But then you can also sort of recognize that this is a sensation and self-soothe, and then kind of retrain yourself to think of that bigger picture perspective. So public speaking is such a great example of this because we're not actually being hunted by lions, but it certainly feels like we might be when we're up on stage if someone does have stage fright. And so this is one of the ways we can, I guess, start to retrain.
Yes, I was talking to a friend. We were emailing back and forth. She was on a plane and she was telling me she was coming back from a trip and that she was so deep and buried in work that needed to be done. She felt right running, and I know her well enough that I could tell where she was at. So my response to her was, where do you think you're going to go on the plane? How far do you think you're going to get running on the plane? And it was just enough to break her out of it and get her back to work. It was really fun. So, tell me this, Catherine, what impact are you most proud of? And I'm not interested in professionally or publicly. I'm interested in personally. What impact are you most proud of?
Hmm. I love that. Absolutely. I think for me, it's always people, isn't it? It's when someone, who actually, I don't think I've ever shared this on a podcast, but during COVID, I was working on a passion project, and it was about healthy workplace culture. And we were building an app in a community where people could share their experiences and not feel so alone. And someone approached me saying, I actually don't even know if you can edit this out, but she approached me saying that she was feeling really suicidal and she didn't know who to turn to, but our community gave her hope. And I remember messaging her saying, like, I'm not a professional, but I'm absolutely happy to be there for you as a friend and, have this safe space for you. Please reach out to me. You're not alone. And she still messages me today, 4 or 5 years on, no, 6 years on, and says, thank you, because if you, a stranger from the other side of the world, hadn't responded to let me know that someone in the world cared, I wouldn't be here today. And so, like, I get emotional thinking about it, but it just goes to show how important it is to share your story and remind people that we're not alone.
It is. I love you. Remind me of something I call the philanthropic mindset. I do keynotes and workshops, and I even have a monthly article. Being a philanthropist, I have people coming to me and saying, when I have money, I want to be a philanthropist. So I decided, how do I switch this up? And so I created the philanthropic mindset because your smile, a hello, or in your case, speaking to someone in need can make all the difference in the world. And when we cross over the line is when we have an expectation of something in return. So I just want to compliment
Right.
you on having the philanthropic mindset and also being astute enough to say I'm not a professional, so that they've set the level of what you could offer, how special of memory that is for you, even in a difficult time for that person. Tell me
Mhm.
this, what boundary has become essential to your sustainability?
I think it comes down to the values and the ethics of things. So now we would just never compromise on working on a project where we fundamentally disagree with the messaging or the product or I guess the viewpoint of that brand or founder. And obviously there's various shades of gray, and sometimes it's not always transparent what that looks like. But from our end, I'm just not at all willing to compromise, if they treat the team poorly, if there's anything that yeah is problematic, then there's no price tag that makes it worthwhile for me. So that's one of the firm lines that we draw.
What kind of culture do you hope people experience when they work with you?
Oh, I definitely hope it's one of curiosity and learning. So it's something we look out for early on and encourage throughout every stage. I think, especially in any form of marketing, so much is evolving all the time. And with use of tech today, you have to be curious. So I think that it's a big thing that we encourage. And going back to your earlier point around mistakes, we don't mind mistakes at all, especially if it's part of the learning, as long as there is that, I guess, moment to reflect and recognize how to improve and keep moving forward. So, yeah, definitely a level of psychological safety when it comes to exploring your curiosities and learning something new.
Yeah, yeah, I love this. Tell me this. Um, what is something you've intentionally stopped measuring?
Hmm, have to consider for a moment. Hmm. Maybe vanity metrics. So, a lot of people in our industry, there is a focus on kind of growth for its sake. So, for example, follower count or reach. And some of these are such broad brushstroke numbers that don't necessarily have enough weight behind them in terms of that end impact. So we've been very intentional when it comes to both reporting professionally and also personally about what numbers really matter. And for me personally, I made the decision that some of those metrics don't hold the value that I personally carry. And it's not necessarily what we want to focus on when it comes to measuring output or, I guess, end metrics.
Yeah. What does renewal look like for Catherine beyond a day off or just resting? How do you renew?
I actually love breath work. It's one of my favorite current practices. So there's a lot of books on this. The William Hoff method's a popular one, but I've noticed actually that I literally breathe better even when I'm not doing breath work. So, in the mornings I used to wake up sort of congested or just having a hard time breathing. But now having, adopted this practice consistently, basically for a good 2 years or so, I've really noticed that it's changed, my posture, my ability to just breathe on a day-to-day basis, but also to regulate my nervous system. So it's a non-negotiable for me these
Yeah,
days.
I love it. I love it. I have a avid Pilates practice for a long time, and it's non-negotiable for me as well. Tell me this, since you started Catalyst Brand Strategy, what have you learned about trust?
Hmm. I would say that it's such a cliche, but like communication is key in the sense that I think that in order to establish trust to some degree, you have to be transparent. So it very almost knowing the importance of sharing things early, even if it's a doubt you have in your mind, or even if you're not sure if you like if it's the right time to be sharing something, if it's sort of bothering you in, or if it's something that you're worried it could compound, instead of letting it fester, we always encourage people, please let us know early. We would so much rather have that hard conversation or have that early conversation than let it mount to something even bigger down the line. And so I think that involves a certain level of self-awareness, but also regular checks to ensure that things are continuing to move smoothly and you're building that relationship.
Yeah. What does legacy mean to you at this stage of your life?
Hmm. I think it goes back to the impact piece. So it's not just about holding it for myself or the next generations within my own family line. I really see it as a wider ripple effect of truly changing people's lives beyond just my kind of family unit or neighborhood unit. And I think that that perspective is also informing, I guess, um, what we want to be creating and the types of clients we like working with and the relationships we build, because I'm always mindful that, especially being in the health and wellness sector, it's so nice to know that if we're promoting a product or if that product gets featured in a magazine or publication, it means that they're reaching the people who would truly benefit from it, and it creates this beautiful ripple impact of more people having access to health.
Yeah. Tell us, what is the boldest vision of what comes next?
Oh, I also haven't shared this yet on a podcast, but I've been thinking a lot about because I did a course recently on Coursera called like the 10,000 women who are learning about investing or finance or something like this. And it's basically like a free course that they've distributed to over 10,000 women in different pockets of the world. And I would love to do something similar to this, where, maybe we're sharing a free resource and we're just offering this to those who otherwise wouldn't have access. And it allows them to apply it to their own life, and whether it's DIY their own publicity or know how to pitch themselves in a conversation. I think, yeah, I would love to just give and help those who otherwise wouldn't have access.
It's the best part of life. Tell me this. If your much, much younger self were listening to this podcast we're recording, what would you tell her?
Oh, how old is the younger self?
Young, your young self, right? Maybe you were a
Okay.
little girl.
That's that's fair. Hmm. I think I would just remind her again that like anything is possible and you really can do it. Just give it a shot.
I love that. So, if your story could leave the viewers with one invitation today, what would it be?
Please reach out to someone to either whether it be thank them for being a part of your life or let them know that you're there for them. I think, connection, there's so many studies these days that show the loneliness epidemic and I guess like the disconnect that many people are experiencing with screens and social media and all the rest. So I think it's so important to just take a few minutes and reach out to that person you've been meaning to reach out to or extend a thanks to someone who has really helped shape your life, even if it's like an old teacher or an old mentor or, any of the above. I think it's just so important to share that level of kindness and gratitude. So that would be
I
one suggestion.
I agree. Katherine Tuominen, thank you for being on Opening Pathways today. Catalyst Brand Strategy founder. Tell us again about your business and how we can find you.
Thank you. Yes, you're welcome to find me at www.catalystbrandstrategy.com. We offer a complimentary, we call it a sample session, where we'll review your current blocks when it comes to public relations and communications and offer a map on how to proceed. And you're welcome to also connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like a short conversation, and we'll take it from there.
Amazing. Thank you for being on Opening Pathways today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for such insightful questions, Tom. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yes, and to my viewers, this is Tom LeNoble, and I'll see you next time.